The thunderous roar of motorcycle engines shattered the peaceful Friday afternoon at Jefferson Elementary School like a sledgehammer through glass. Sarah Mitchell looked up from the stack of third-grade math tests she was grading, her pen frozen mid-correction. Through her classroom window, she watched 5 gleaming Harley-Davidsons roll into the school's visitor parking lot, their chrome exhaust pipes spitting flame and fury. The riders dismounted with practiced swagger, leather-clad figures whose presence seemed to darken the cheerful yellow school buses still lined up for late pickup. "Ma'am, are those the bad guys from the movies?" 8-year-old Tommy Chun asked from the doorway, his Spider-Man backpack clutched tight against his chest. He'd returned for his forgotten lunchbox, but now stood transfixed by the scene outside. Sarah's fingers unconsciously found the thin chain around her neck, hidden beneath her powder blue cardigan. The worn dog tags rested against her skin like a secret heartbeat, a reminder of who she used to be, who she was trying not to be anymore. "Just some visitors, Tommy. Why don't you head to the front office while I finish up here?" But her eyes never left the window. 5 men in leather vests bearing skull patches were spreading out across the parking lot in what Sarah's trained mind immediately recognized as a tactical formation. The lead rider, a massive man with arms like tree trunks and a beard that could hide small weapons, was pointing directly at the school's main entrance. Sarah had spent 2 years at Jefferson Elementary, being exactly what everyone expected. The soft-spoken teacher who brought homemade cookies to faculty meetings, who stayed late to help struggling students, who wore floral dresses and spoke in gentle tones that never rose above a whisper. Everything about her whispered safe, predictable, harmless. But in exactly 15 minutes, that carefully constructed facade would be ripped away like tissue paper in a hurricane. The afternoon sun caught the leader's face as he turned toward her window, revealing a spider-web tattoo crawling up his neck and dead eyes that had seen too much violence. Sarah's muscle memory kicked in automatically: threat assessment, exit routes, civilian protection protocols. Her classroom suddenly felt like what it really was: a potential kill box with 26 desks, 1 door, and windows that didn't open wide enough for adult escape. She'd come to Jefferson Elementary to teach children about multiplication tables and reading comprehension, to build something beautiful after years of tearing things down. She'd come here to disappear into the blessed anonymity of suburban motherhood without the children, to serve others without carrying a weapon, to protect innocence by nurturing it rather than by eliminating threats. But trouble, Sarah was about to remember, had a way of finding Army Rangers, even retired ones trying to hide behind chalkboards and parent-teacher conferences. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell had arrived at Jefferson Elementary on a humid September morning 2 years ago, her references impeccable, her smile warm, and her past completely scrubbed from public record. Principal David Harris, a 20-year Navy veteran himself, had hired her on the spot, not just for her impressive education credentials, but for something he couldn't quite put his finger on: the way she carried herself, the way her eyes swept a room before she entered it, the way she unconsciously positioned herself near exits. "She's got that look," he told his wife that evening. "Like she's seen things, but good things too. Like she knows what she's protecting." The students adored her. Sarah had a gift for making fractions feel like puzzles and history lessons feel like adventure stories. She never raised her voice, never showed frustration, never lost her patience. Not even when hyperactive Marcus Rodriguez decided to launch paper airplanes during silent reading time. But what the children didn't notice was how she arranged her classroom. Clear sight lines to the door, emergency supplies discreetly stocked in locked cabinets, and her desk positioned to provide cover if needed. Her colleagues saw a dedicated teacher who arrived early and stayed late, who volunteered for lunch duty and chaperoned field trips, who brought extraordinary attention to detail to everything from lesson plans to fire drill procedures. What they missed were the subtle military habits that had become second nature. The way she checked locks twice, the way she mentally cataloged every person in her room, the way she never sat with her back to an open door. Coach Mike Bradley, the school's PE teacher and former Army infantry, had suspected something from day one. Sarah moved like someone who'd been trained to move: economical, purposeful, aware. During their brief conversations in the faculty lounge, she'd display flashes of knowledge that civilian teachers simply didn't possess. She knew too much about foreign countries, spoke with too much authority about discipline and structure, and had scars on her hands that didn't come from playground accidents. But Sarah had built her new identity carefully. She lived alone in a tidy apartment filled with teacher supplies and children's books. She attended church socials and community events, always with a smile, always willing to help, always alone. She told everyone the same carefully rehearsed story. Military family background, moved around a lot, wanted stability. Most people stopped asking questions after that. The Venom Riders Motorcycle Club had been terrorizing suburban communities for the past 6 months, operating with the cold efficiency of organized crime wrapped in the theatrical brutality of biker culture. Marcus Razor Thompson, their president, had built a lucrative protection racket targeting schools, churches, and community centers, places where resistance was minimal and public sympathy was high. Razor wasn't stupid. He picked targets carefully. Institutions with limited security, leaders who avoided confrontation, communities that valued peace over principle. He'd already collected protection fees from 5 schools in the district, each time following the same playbook. Arrive with overwhelming force. Identify the weakest link in the authority structure. Apply psychological pressure until compliance was achieved. Jefferson Elementary represented the crown jewel of his territory, a well-funded school in an affluent neighborhood where parents would pay anything to keep their children safe. Razor had spent weeks studying the school's routines, noting when staff arrived and departed, identifying who held real power versus who simply held titles. Principal Harris had been his first target. The Navy veteran had responded exactly as Razor expected. Stern warnings, calls to police, attempts to reason with unreasonable men. But Razor had done his homework on Harris too. Career Navy Mint rules, protocols, chains of command. Military minds, in Razor's experience, could be intimidated by superior force and the threat of collateral damage. What Razor hadn't counted on was the quiet teacher in room 15B who'd overheard his conversation with the principal. Sarah had been walking past the main office when she heard raised voices. Through the glass, she'd seen Razor looming over Principal Harris's desk, his massive frame blocking the smaller man's escape route. 3 other bikers flanked the exits. It was a textbook intimidation setup, and Sarah recognized it immediately. "You got 1 week to think about our offer," Razor was saying, his voice carrying the practiced menace of someone who'd made similar threats before. $5,000 a month, and we guarantee nothing bad happens to your pretty little school. Accidents happen to places without protection. Fires, break-ins, sometimes even when the kiddies are inside. Principal Harris's face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave school property immediately." Razor laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "We'll leave when we're ready to leave, sailor boy, and we'll be back next Friday for your answer." That's when Sarah made her decision. She couldn't hide anymore. The confrontation began in the parking lot 15 minutes later, as Sarah walked to her car with deliberate casualness, her leather satchel slung across her shoulder like any other teacher ending her workday. She'd sent Tommy to the front office as instructed, but she knew Razor and his crew were still on campus, still making their presence felt. Well, what do we have here?" Razor's voice cut through the autumn air as Sarah approached her Honda Civic. He was leaning against her driver's side door, arms crossed, a predatory smile splitting his weathered face. His 4 companions had positioned themselves in a loose semicircle around her car, not close enough to be obviously threatening, but near enough to cut off escape routes. Sarah stopped 6 feet away, her keys jingling softly in her hand. To any observer, she looked like exactly what she appeared to be, a nervous teacher caught off guard by intimidating strangers. Her shoulders hunched slightly inward, her gaze dropped to the asphalt. Her voice came out small and apologetic. "Excuse me, I just need to get to my car." "Oh, you need something?" Razor pushed himself off the Honda and took a step closer. Sarah noticed the slight limp in his left leg. Old motorcycle accident, probably, or maybe a barroom brawl gone wrong. She cataloged it automatically alongside other details. The The way his right hand favored his hip where a knife would be concealed, the fact that his backup was positioned poorly for mutual support, the clean sight lines to the school security cameras. Maybe we can help each other out, Razor continued, closing the distance between them. You work here, right? Teach the little rugrats how to read and write. Yes, sir. 3rd grade. Sarah's voice remained soft, submissive, but her weight had shifted almost imperceptibly to the balls of her feet. I really should be going. My cat needs his medicine. The lie rolled off her tongue effortlessly. Sarah had learned long ago that giving potential threats small, harmless details made you seem more vulnerable, less capable of resistance. People looking for easy victims wanted to believe you were weak. Cat medicine, huh? Razor chuckled, and his crew echoed the sound on cue. That's real sweet. But here's the thing, Teach, your boss and me, we got some business to discuss. And sometimes business goes smoother when employees help out their employers. You understand what I'm saying? Sarah nodded quickly, playing her part. I don't really get involved in administrative decisions. I just teach fractions and spelling. Fractions and spelling. Razor was close enough now that Sarah could smell the mixture of cigarettes, motor oil, and stale beer that clung to his leather vest. That's cute. Real cute. But sometimes teachers gotta learn new subjects. That's when everything changed. Tommy Chun came running around the corner of the building, his Spider-Man backpack bouncing against his small frame. He'd forgotten to mention his soccer cleats were in his desk, and his mom would be furious if he showed up to practice without them. The 8-year-old skidded to a stop when he saw his teacher surrounded by the leather-clad strangers. Miss Mitchell. Tommy's voice cracked with confusion and growing fear. Are you okay? The protective instinct hit Sarah like a physical blow. Every nerve ending in her body suddenly came alive with combat readiness. The child's presence changed everything. This was no longer about avoiding conflict or maintaining her cover. This was about keeping an innocent safe. Tommy, go back inside, she said, and for the first time, her voice carried a note of authority that made Razor's eyes narrow slightly. But Miss Mitchell, now! The single word cracked like a whip, and Tommy stumbled backward, suddenly uncertain. Sarah had never spoken to him like that. None of the children had ever heard that tone from their gentle teacher. Razor noticed the change too. Well, looks like Teach has got some backbone after all. He turned toward Tommy with deliberate menace. Hey there, little man. Don't you think you should listen to adults when they're talking business? Sarah stepped between Razor and the child, her movements smooth and controlled. Leave him alone. Your business is with the administration, not with students. My business, Razor said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, is with anyone I say it's with. You know what your problem is, Teach? Razor's massive hand shot out and grabbed Sarah's upper arm, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to leave bruises. You don't show proper respect for your betters. Sarah went perfectly still, her breathing controlled, her eyes fixed on Tommy, who was backing toward the school building with tears starting to form. Every instinct screamed at her to react, to use the 17 different ways she knew to break Razor's grip and put him on the ground. But not with the child watching. Not yet. Tommy, run back to the principal's office and stay there, she said calmly, never taking her eyes off the boy. Tell Mr. Harris exactly what you see here. Listen here, lady. Razor's other hand bunched in the fabric of Sarah's cardigan, pulling her closer. Nobody gives orders around here except, get away from my teacher. Tommy's shout echoed across the parking lot as the 8-year-old charged forward, his small fists swinging wildly at Razor's legs. The biker laughed and casually swatted the child aside, sending Tommy sprawling across the asphalt with a sharp cry of pain and fear. The sound of the child hitting the pavement flipped a switch in Sarah's brain that had been dormant for 2 years. Time to teach both of you some manners, Razor snarled, his grip tightening on Sarah's cardigan. Maybe a little lesson about what happens to people who don't cooperate with the Venom Riders. He yanked hard, and the sound of tearing fabric filled the air. Sarah's cardigan ripped from collar to chest, the delicate buttons flying like tiny missiles as the sweater split apart. She stumbled backward, the ruined garment hanging open to reveal the fitted tank top underneath. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the autumn wind seemed to pause as every eye in the parking lot focused on what the torn cardigan had exposed. Across Sarah's left shoulder blade, visible through the thin fabric of her tank top, was a work of art that told a story none of them had expected. The Army Ranger tab was inked in bold black letters, the distinctive arch shape unmistakable to anyone who'd served. Below it, in smaller text but equally clear, were the words 75th Ranger Regiment and 3rd Battalion. Surrounding the tattoo were scars, the puckered circle of a bullet wound near her shoulder, the thin white line of a knife cut along her collarbone, and other marks that spoke of violence survived and enemies defeated. Razor's hand, still clutching the torn fabric, began to tremble slightly. His face cycled through confusion, recognition, and finally, dawning terror as the implications hit him like a freight train. Army Rangers, whispered one of his backup crew, a skinny man with meth-rotted teeth who'd apparently retained enough military knowledge to understand what they were looking at. Holy shit, boss. She's 75th. The transformation in Sarah was subtle, but unmistakable. She hadn't moved, hadn't taken a fighting stance, hadn't done anything overtly threatening. But something fundamental had shifted in the way she held herself. Shoulders squared, chin lifted, eyes cold and calculating. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost every trace of the gentle teacher they thought they'd been intimidating. "Gentlemen," Sarah said quietly, "I believe you owe me an apology." The parking lot had become a frozen tableau, as if someone had pressed pause on reality itself. Razor's grip on the torn cardigan loosened, and the ruined fabric fluttered to the asphalt like a white flag of surrender. "You your army?" Razor's voice had climbed an octave, the swagger completely drained from his tone. "But you're just a teacher. You teach little kids." "I teach fractions and spelling," Sarah agreed, her voice carrying a deadly calm that made the air around them feel charged with electricity. "But before that, I taught Taliban fighters about the consequences of threatening innocence. Would you like me to demonstrate some of those lessons?" Principal Harris came running from the school building, drawn by Tommy's tearful report and the commotion outside. He skidded to a stop when he saw the scene. Sarah standing with her military tattoo exposed, 5 leather-clad bikers backing away like they'd seen a ghost, and pieces of torn cardigan scattered across the parking lot. "Sarah," Harris breathed, his Navy training allowing him to immediately recognize what he was seeing. "Rangers? 75th Regiment. 3rd Battalion, sir," Sarah replied, unconsciously snapping to a more formal posture when addressing a superior officer. Sergeant First Class Mitchell retired. Tommy picked himself up from the asphalt, brushing gravel from his scraped palms, and moved to stand behind Sarah. Despite his tears and confusion, some primal instinct told him he was safest near his teacher. "Miss Mitchell is a soldier?" Tommy asked, his 8-year-old voice filled with awe rather than fear. "Was a soldier, Tommy. Now I'm your teacher." Sarah's voice softened when she addressed the child, but her eyes never left Razor. "And teachers protect their students." Coach Bradley appeared from the gymnasium, alerted by the noise. The former infantry soldier took one look at Sarah's exposed tattoo and let out a low whistle. "Ranger School. Damn, Sarah. Here I was thinking you were just really good at maintaining classroom discipline." Word was spreading. Other teachers emerged from the building. Parents arriving for pickup slowed their cars, and several people had their phones out, recording what was clearly becoming an extraordinary moment. The footage would be on social media within minutes, but Sarah no longer cared about maintaining her cover. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah said, using Razor's real name, information she'd gathered during her own reconnaissance of the local threat environment. "I believe you have something to say to this child you assaulted and to this school you threatened." Razor's face went through several more color changes as he realized she knew exactly who he was. His backup crew was edging toward their motorcycles, clearly ready to abandon their leader if this situation went any further south. "Look, we didn't know. I mean, if we'd known you were..." "What? That I'd bled for this country? That I'd earned the right to teach children in peace?" Sarah took a step forward, and despite being nearly a foot shorter than Razor, he instinctively backed away. or just that I could put you down in ways that would make your nightmares have nightmares. The apology, when it finally came, was stuttered and sincere. Razor dropped to one knee in front of Tommy, his voice barely above a whisper as he asked the child's forgiveness for pushing him down. To Sarah, standing with her hands clasped behind her back in parade rest position, he offered something that sounded like genuine remorse. "Ma'am, we'll be moving on. This school, hell, this whole district, is off limits to the Venom Riders. You have my word. Your word." Sarah's eyebrow arched. "Mr. Thompson, I'm making my business to know about threats in my operational area. You have outstanding warrants in 3 counties and a pattern of targeting educational institutions. Your word isn't worth the breath you're wasting saying it." Detective Lisa Park arrived just as Razor and his crew were climbing onto their motorcycles, engines rumbling with considerably less swagger than when they'd arrived. The Korean-American officer took one look at the scene, torn cardigan, crowd of witnesses, phones recording everything, and immediately understood she'd missed the main event. "Everything under control here?" Detective Park asked, though the answer was obvious from the way the bikers were retreating. "Just a misunderstanding," Sarah replied, pulling her ruined cardigan closed with practiced dignity. These gentlemen were leaving. Within a week, #TeacherHero was trending nationally. The video of Sarah's revealed tattoo and the bikers' retreat had been viewed millions of times, spawning countless discussions about hidden strength, veteran transitions, and the true meaning of protection. News outlets wanted interviews, but Sarah politely declined them all. She did, however, agree to speak at the school district's Veteran Appreciation Assembly. Standing before an auditorium full of students, parents, and fellow veterans, Sarah chose her words carefully. "Real strength isn't about intimidation or fear," she told the crowd, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed space. "It's about service. It's about standing between danger and the innocent, whether that's on a battlefield in Afghanistan or in a school parking lot in suburbia." Tommy, sitting in the front row with his class, raised his hand. "Miss Mitchell, are you still going to teach us fractions?" Sarah smiled, the same warm, gentle smile her students had always known. "Every day, Tommy. That's what teachers do. We show up, we serve, and we help you grow. Some of us just have different ways of handling playground bullies."